Hello, my name is Hamic, and I'm presenting my thesis on the sacralization of politics in American society. Religion has long been a foundational aspect of America's governing principles. In his renowned farewell address, former President George Washington argues that of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. While Washington himself may have leaned toward deism, it is evident that he considered religion a fundamental component to both the social and the political realms. He believed that, since the people would rule in America, it was necessary for morality to serve as a check to their desires and ambitions. The former president later notes that morality cannot be maintained without religion. He claimed that religion serves as the foundation for virtue, and that it cannot be substituted by reason alone. In recent years, America has seemingly shifted away from her religious underpinnings. According to news source USA Today, Americans are becoming less religious, leaving organized faiths, and identifying instead as individuals who believe in nothing in particular. However, Christian apologist G.K. Chesterton would argue that an individual always puts his faith in something. He claims that when a man stops believing in God, he doesn't believe in nothing, he believes in anything. While America is a secularizing society, it is not an irreligious society. Organized faith has been dethroned, but politics has taken its place. In Animal Farm by George Orwell, animals join forces and overthrow the human farmer who oppressed them. Upon deposing the man, the animals resolve to follow a set of moral ideals. These are outlined as the 7 commandments. The commandments emphasize the animals' equality and freedom from servitude. The animals are filled with hope and pride in their self-government and faithfully follow the regulations set forth by their founders. As the novel progresses, the pigs take over the leadership of the farm. They gradually become more powerful and begin to use their influence to benefit themselves at the expense of other animals. The laws governing what is right are sacrificed by the pigs' pursuit of what works politically. Eventually, the pigs alter the commandments in order to fit their political agendas. This alteration is gradual, as the pigs merely add a few words to each commandment and convince the other animals that they remembered the initial phrases incorrectly. At the conclusion of the novel, however, the original moral ideals of the animals are lost completely, and with the commandments go their freedom and liberty. The story of Animal Farm is applicable to today's political environment. Rather than hold fast to preconceived moral principles, citizens are looking to their political affiliations and leaders for their standards and ideals. This shift in society's moral foundation has widespread detrimental effects, from an increase in political polarization to the devaluing of absolute truth. According to Senator Ben Sasse, author Ezra Klein, and numerous other researchers, political polarization is at an all-time high in American society. This is because political affiliations are taking the place of religious teaching, which has long been the standard bearer for morality, in order to allow for collective preferences that were once viewed as unacceptable and sinful. These alterations to moral accuracy now supersede absolute truth, creating effects much like that of Animal Farm. Citizens view members of the opposing party as inherently wrong and intrinsically evil, leaving little room for mutual respect and decency. If allowed to continue at its current rate, this emotional polarization will destroy the nation as we know it. In the summer of 2025, numerous different unions and organizations called for a boycott of Independence Day in America. They claimed that there was no longer any freedom to observe in light of recent immigration protocols. On a day usually filled with patriotic celebrations lasting until the early hours of the next morning, there would be a silent rebellion. no parties, no fireworks, no parades. Instead, citizens would spend the day indoors, withholding their money and their presents from the festivities. John Swartz, founder of the People's Union USA, advised individuals not to wave a flag for a country that no longer waves for you. Rather than focus on unifying the nation through patriotism and long-standing tradition, these organizations attempted to divide the nation even further in order to pursue their own agendas regarding illegal immigration. They concentrated on the success of their political party, ultimately exalting party over patriotism in their endeavor to publicize their views. Political violence and subversive protests have become normalized in American society. From the brutal murder of orator Charlie Kirk to the unprovoked assassination of Representative Melissa Hortman, insurrection and mutiny are becoming commonplace occurrences in America. Political affiliations are endorsing and even promoting these acts of violence for members of the opposing party. If America continues to dismiss these perfidious actions, then the political and social state of the nation will be in disrepair. The Democrat and Republican parties were originally formed to facilitate healthy debates and allow for equal representation. But how have the parties that were created to support American politics reduced themselves to pugnacious tribes that ceaselessly attempt to demonize their opponents by hurling insults and spreading lies? It is clear that the state of our political discourse is damaging the nation. The enmity in today's political environment is attributed to the moral role that has been assumed by politics. Political affiliations have replaced the religious compass of our founding fathers that once directed the course of America and her unmatched morality, a reality that is now, ultimately, destroying the nation. Religion is defined as a cause, principle, or set of beliefs that is held to with ardor and faith. It is a set of principles or ideologies that is arduously defended and adamantly espoused. Where some individuals believe religion to be a faith in the supernatural, this is not necessarily the case. Everyone has a religion. Everyone worships something. Everyone lives by faith. This idea may seem far-fetched, but consider this present-day reality. In America, political ideologies are the new religion, political leaders are worshipped, and faith is found through one's party. This sacralization of politics provides a method for constituents to rationalize violence, and unfortunately, this is nothing new. Think back to the Crusades in 1095. The Crusades were a series of wars fought between the Christians and the Muslims over control of the Holy Land. During the Crusades, mass murder, remorseless cannibalism, and vicious lootings became commonplace. Historians report that soldiers trudged through blood that reached their ankles in the aftermath of a siege. These wars were religiously motivated and were therefore seen as just sacrifices that were necessary for the greater good. In the same way that the Crusades were excused by many due to their moral motives, individuals today are dismissing cruelty and brutality when it is on the basis of their political party's ideologies. In other words, the ends do not justify the means. Where political associations strive to create new laws, promote social justice, and construct a better world, they often do so at the expense of politicians and constituents on the opposing side. This mindset is rationalized by the party's end goal of cultivating a brighter future and advancing the common good, similar to the way that the Crusades were vindicated through the motives of reclaiming a religious site and expanding Christianity. C.S. Lewis reiterates this concept, saying, "I think nearly all the crimes which Christians have perpetrated arise from this, that religion is confused with politics." As recently revealed by the Pew Research Center, organized religion is in decline. However, the desire for a meaningful identity remains. In a secularizing society, individuals are looking to certain substitutes to take the place of more orthodox faiths. The new belief in politics is an attempt to fill the gap that institutionalized religion left behind. Americans have not ceased to worship, they have shifted the recipient of that worship. Although it does so poorly, politics seems to be the greatest replacement religion of this secular age. It provides all that sinful human creatures desire. Many of these desires are actually innate cravings that are perfectly satisfied by Christianity. In a secular society, however, individuals must look to fulfill these cravings through other means. Citizens look to politics for salvation, fellowship, and purpose, though political associations offer a more personalized variation of the traditional religious doctrine. These quasi-religious politics claim to be a comprehensive framework that can explain one's purpose and fulfill his desires. And the greater one's zeal, the higher his status in this faith. In his book, The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, author and researcher Jonathan Haidt notes that individuals on either side of the aisle have differing moral views. Because citizens are increasingly looking to their political affiliations to determine their moral values, their principles are beginning to diverge. This, in turn, encourages hostility between constituents, as it has before between the Christians and the Muslims in the Crusades. Religion and politics have always had a conflicting relationship. The Independence Day protest was an example of the exaltation of a political party, but this veneration has been an issue since the early ages. In the time of Jesus, the Jews' ability to identify the Messiah was inhibited by their political expectations. Jesus, a relatively apolitical figure, explained that his kingdom was not of this world. Where the Jews anticipated a military leader to displace the Roman occupation in Judea, Jesus refused violence and desired to unite the Jews with God. While Christ possessed strong views of what society should look like, his vision for the renewal of his people was never a political push for power. Instead, he focused on personal salvation and rightness with God. The Zealots were a Jewish sect that aimed to forcefully restore God's rule over Israel. These individuals possessed a religious purpose, but utilized this motive to vindicate brutality. Where the Zealots sought to overthrow the Romans through violence and terrorism, Jesus looked to justify and sanctify his people through an act of undying love. Simon, a disciple of Christ, had strong affiliations with this radical Jewish party. Upon following Christ, however, Simon abandoned his political ties. He could not serve both God and politics. It is important to note that political involvement is not evil and should be encouraged within reason. It is when political faith supersedes God's law that it becomes perilous. The Zealots' focus shifted from restoring the Lord as King of Israel to securing political liberty. But figures such as Esther, David, and Nehemiah were able to use their political positions to free their people and carry out God's will. They did so by placing the will of God at the forefront of their minds, rather than by securing political power for their own agendas. On the journey to the New World, Governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Winthrop, reminded the Pilgrims that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword through the world. He noted that if Americans failed to succeed, they would be ridiculed by other nations and disrespected by all. Today, America is viewed unfavorably by nearly half the world. While studies show that individuals once believed American democracy should be emulated by other nations, this is no longer the case. Clearly, something changed. Citizens went from considering political involvement as a duty to one's country, to viewing politics as an outlet for their frustrations. Constituents who once elevated chivalry and propriety now excuse violence and misconduct when it is performed by a member of their own party. These issues present a little-known fact. The devil's deception plays a crucial role in politics. Americans have, in fact, dealt falsely with their God. They have allowed the devil to creep in through the guise of political zeal. As C.S. Lewis states in a letter, the devil claims politics for his own, as almost the citadel of his power. Through an individual's preoccupation with political issues, the devil is able to divert him from Christ. The constant drama originating from politics serves as a distraction from spiritual fixations, and the divisiveness that political affiliations cause prevents unity and fellowship between individuals. In the Screwtape Letters, Lewis writes as a demon named Screwtape, who is tasked with guiding his nephew on how to deceive a human. Screwtape tells his nephew to ensure that meetings, movements, pamphlets, policies, causes, and crusades matter more to him than prayers and sacraments and charity, and he will be ours. I could show you a pretty cage full down here. Screwtape tells his nephew that many individuals have been deceived through politics and are now caged in hell. Through the character of Screwtape, Lewis warns against the religion of politics. As highlighted by Senator Ben Sasse in his book, Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal, America is experiencing an epidemic. He notes that we're richer and better informed and more connected, and unhappier and more isolated and less fulfilled. There is a crucial discrepancy here. Despite recent medical advancements, there has been a decrease in the average life expectancy of Americans. But what is the cause of this unprecedented issue? Loneliness. Scientists have begun to explore the effects of loneliness on the human brain, and the results are consistent. Studies suggest that one lonely day exacts the same toll on the body as smoking an entire pack of cigarettes. And in America, 52 million people experience loneliness. Senator Ben Sasse argues that this feeling of isolation causes people to form anti-tribes, which are groups that form due to a common hatred rather than a common goal. In their desperation to find community, Americans have begun to replace meaningful companionship with shared resentment. Where churches and local communities promote fellowship in the United States, political parties stimulate an attitude of hostility while lacking the ability to unify their members in a meaningful way. Studies show that individuals who attend church regularly are nearly 50% less likely to feel lonely or isolated. With regular church attendance in decline, citizens are looking to their political parties to fill the gap. The decline of religion in America is ultimately to blame for the increase in political polarization. It has been stated that politics is inherently tied to an individual's belief system, and that it is, therefore, impossible to prevent politics from becoming a religion. Religion is generally considered foundational to one's identity, as individuals base their beliefs and opinions on their religion. This fact, however, only serves to highlight the importance of the separation of religion and politics. It is true that politics is a means of representing one's belief system, but politics should never be the belief system. An individual's identity encompasses many aspects of his life, and politics should be a facet of one's identity rather than the foundation of it. While making choices based on one's identity is often considered a natural part of decision-making, author and researcher Ezra Klein found that one's political identity now supersedes all other identities. In his book, Why We're Polarized, Klein notes that one is more likely to refine his other beliefs and opinions in order to fit his political sympathies than he is to allow his identities to contradict each other. If one's morals disagree with his party's ideologies, he will modify his morals. No other establishment claims this amount of authority over an individual's thoughts, opinions, and emotions. How, then, can an individual separate his political standpoints from his core identity? One must invest in building an identity rooted in Christ and avoid relying on politics as a central aspect of his or her person. In his book, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis writes the following: "The devil always sends heirs into the world in pairs of opposites, and he always encourages us to spend a lot of time thinking which is the worse. You see why, of course? He relies on your extra dislike of the one heir to draw you gradually into the opposite one. But do not let us be fooled. We must keep our eyes on the goal and go straight through between both heirs. In America, every individual is presented with a choice. The choice to invest in politics and contribute to society, or to disregard politics and avoid conflict at the expense of one's beliefs. However, as C.S. Lewis so masterfully explains, Christians must remain focused on their true purpose, to love, enjoy, and obey God, and utilize this mindset to make decisions for the sake of Christ's kingdom." Thank you. I would now like to take questions from the judges.
Well, Allie, I'll go first since I was your advisor, and I have to commend you. You did a fantastic job tackling this project, and I really can't take any credit for helping with this, so good job.
Thank you.
And so with this, I mean, you made some compelling arguments supported by many great quotes in here. How do we get back to the original foundation that our founding fathers had envisioned for us?
Yes, ma'am. So I definitely think an important part of that is recognizing that anyone who is politically involved is involved in politics because they want to make America better. So actually, in a study in one of the books I read, Why We're Polarized, Democrats and Republicans were forced to spend a week together, like getting to know each other, having conversations. And there was a survey conducted at the beginning of that week and then at the end. And they realized that once they had interacted with each other and like got to know each other outside of politics, they were much more likely to be open to other opinions and like be respectful. And so I think a big part of that is recognizing that, again, like anyone who is politically involved has the same goal, even if they have different views on how they should reach that goal. Ultimately, anyone who is politically involved is doing so because they want to make America better.
Very good. In that statement, you just said how people do find common ground, right? How does that change, though, when it comes time to vote? While they might not believe in something, they still vote for it anyway because it's the party line.
Yes, ma'am.
In your research, did you come across anything that explains maybe how lobbyists play a part in that?
I didn't look at lobbyists specifically, but I did find that generally if someone identifies in a certain party, even if they don't really have an opinion on the issue that they're voting on, they're just going to vote along party lines. And so I do think that plays a big part in this because it's like there's no in between. You can either be a part of this party or part of this party, and you have to have all of your opinions fit inside that party's lines, which I don't think is how it should be, but is what we're seeing with voting patterns.
Right. So as a Christian, how should we represent the populace and still be true to our faith?
Yes, ma'am. So actually in my interview, I talked with a woman who's very involved in my church and who's also a staffer for a U.S. Senator. And I asked her the same question because she is definitely a very strong Christian. And she said that she never saw herself working in politics, but that the Lord had just opened those doors for her. And so she encouraged anyone who is a Christian and who's going to be politically involved to do so with a spirit of love and humility, and just to ultimately recognize that in any realm that Christians are in, our purpose is not in that sphere. Our purpose is for the Lord and to glorify Him and to bring others to Him. And so if a Christian is politically involved, they must do so with a spirit of love, and ultimately with the goal of sharing Christ with others.
Okay, thank you. Great job.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So if your thesis is that we've sacralized politics,
Yes, sir.
sort of replaced religion, and you started out by talking about the founding fathers saying, essentially, if we don't hold on to morality, this is all going to fall apart.
Yes, sir.
Well, one thing that I think is different than the founding fathers imagined is just the fracturing of society into different groups.
Yes, sir.
So now we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have Jews, we have atheists and Buddhists, Marxists, and they all have fundamentally different worldviews about reality.
Yes, sir.
How do you think this fracturing of our worldviews in society has led to the sacralization?
Yes, sir. So I definitely think with atheists specifically, and it's kind of like what we've talked about in theology class, if you don't have an identity rooted in Christ that will outlast everything on this earth, you try to put it in other things. And so I think that's a big part because America is becoming more secular and there are more atheists. They're trying to find other things to put their identity in, and a lot of that has been attributed to politics.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Allie, excellent job. I'm curious what prompted you to study this, to want to do this, yeah?
Yes, sir. So whenever we were researching topics, I knew pretty early on that I wanted to do something in politics just because I think that's been a really prominent issue, especially in the past few years. So I was originally going to do it on political polarization, but I met with Ms. Barish over the summer, and I was trying to find like the solution to it, which I found was really difficult. And so I was trying to figure out what the root of the issue was, like why we were so polarized. And ultimately, I decided that this is why. It's because people are exalting politics and making it more than it should be.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the why. I'm curious what you think is the cause. Like, you've looked at a lot of things in surrounding ourselves about what we're against more than what we're for is a thing that came through your paper.
Yes, sir.
It seems like the internet is like drawn us away from community. A lot of other things have.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious what you would say in terms of like how the internet's affected and how in the world do we get past that kind of thing yet?
Yes, sir. I talked about that in my interview as well, actually. And a big part of it is, your feed is supposed to be things that you want to look at. So you're only going to see, for the most part, things that you agree with, which generally is pushing people further into their beliefs, and they're just less likely to consider other opinions because they're not exposed to them. So I think that definitely plays a big role.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I've found too that my feed, like on YouTube, the algorithm keeps giving me anti-liberal things that make liberals look like idiots,
Yes, sir.
And so that what you just said reinforces the idea of anti-tribes, which I found an extremely helpful concept.
Yes, sir.
I had not heard that phrase before.
Annoyingly, Allie, you answered every question that I had written down, like just in your paper. So I'm gonna ask you to say more about it. I wrote down the question: what is religion not providing that politics seems to be providing for some people?
Yes, sir. That's a good question. I definitely think, and I don't know if this answers your question well, but a lot of people are beginning to think that religion or like believing in a God is kind of ridiculous, and politics is a very like immediate, visible solution, if that makes sense. And so I think that definitely plays a big part of it because you can very easily see like the effects that your party's having or like your political leaders that you're like worshiping. It's all very clear, and it's also something that you're exposed to a lot. Whereas I think for religion, you have to look for it, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't want to do.
So Screwtape, he talks about the quote that you gave from the Screwtape Letters, which I love a good Screwtape Letters quote.
Yes, sir.
He talks about the patriot, but he also talks about the pacifist. Those are kind of two extremes that he says he can use for his purposes. Kind of just with those things in mind, if you had a friend who wanted to run for an office, what would you say to them? Would you advise them to do it?
I definitely think if they feel led by the Lord to do so, then that's what they're meant to do. But definitely, again, like I said, in anything that they're doing, just know that they're ultimately a representative of Christ. So to interact with politics with a spirit of love and humility, and ultimately using their political position to bring others to Christ, because that is our ultimate purpose.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You did a great job, Allie,
Thank you.
and you answered all the questions I had too. So that just means you did a wonderful job. So I'm thinking about you all being on the precipice of leaving a place that's provided pretty much a common belief system, a safe place.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you think you'll take all of this as you leave to go to college, where you are going to be faced with even beliefs you can't even imagine that you're going to have, not
Yes,
just
ma'am.
from people you go to school with, but from professors that you're going to have? So how do you think you'll address, the polarizing situations you might find yourself in?
Yes, ma'am. I definitely think a big part of it, especially as a Christian, is to still hold fast to the beliefs that you know are true, but to be respectful of others and to understand, or at least try to understand why they hold the views they do, but ultimately just to be empathetic and kind towards those people, because I don't think anyone's going to bring anyone to Christ by shaming them all the time or thinking that their ideas are ridiculous.
Well, I have the solution to Mr. Drotty's question. If you have a friend who wants to run for politics, you say, no, Allie runs for politics. And we all vote for Allie. Allie, you have finished. You have done a wonderful job.